The thing that I really enjoyed about our conversations here has been around this topic of personal branding and how can both individuals and organizations be more deliberate and intentional around the brands that they're creating. Um, why should, what is personal branding, Nicole, and why should accounting firm leaders be investing time and effort in this area?
So it's funny because I feel like the personal branding, it's been a buzzword over the last couple of years, more so than in the past. I remember when I first started, it was like, oh, what's your elevator pitch? And now a lot of people were like, oh, it's the same thing as personal brand. And it's absolutely not. Elevator pitch, you're just telling somebody about, what it is you do. You're not telling them anything more. It's just an introduction, if you ask me. Whereas personal branding, it's your passion and it's what kind of fuels you. And it's not necessarily what defines you, but it's what motivates you, what inspires you. And you don't have to try because it's already part of you. You just kind of live it. And, recognizing what it is and then kind of just maybe playing on it a little bit, tweaking it ever so slightly. That's kind of the journey of a personal brand. But it always starts from your passion and being intentional about it. And from a firm leadership perspective, if somebody's following their passion and they're doing what they love and they're loving what they do, they're really not working because that's just that they're just doing what they love and they're loving it because it's what they enjoy and they're fulfilled inherently. If you're happy and if an employer supports that and enables that, then they're going to be happy with the employer. They're going to be more happy working. So they're less likely to maybe quit or, slack off because they're going to want to almost work harder to, continue doing what they love and loving what they do. And the employer, at the end of the day, less turnover. That's, less, talent recruitment, taking time to train staff because, obviously if somebody quits, all that time training them and teaching them is ultimately wasted because now they're taking what they learned with you and bringing it elsewhere. So inherently, it's increasing the bottom line, and also it's creating a culture at a firm, and that people are going to, shout to the mountaintops about their experiences. And firm culture is another buzzword, I feel like nowadays too, where, people in the accounting profession specifically are, the perception is not a good one, unfortunately. And in order to kind of tweak that and change that a little bit, I think we need to start talking more and more about the good and not necessarily the bad and the ugly.
Yeah, there's a lot of airtime given to some of those negative messages around the profession, the busy season that people probably hear about or see from their friends in social circles. But what you said there, a lot of businesses have their core values defined, but it sounds like one way of thinking about this is actually this is more the core values of the individual. And how do people think about their personal brand as being their values, their principles, what they want to be known for. Is this something that each individual should be thinking about quite uniquely within a firm, or how do you think about scaling this out beyond individual partners perhaps, Nicole?
Well, I think a pillar of any firm should always be people-centric, essentially. Everyone is obviously very different. Everyone has their own talents and interests and likes. No one is exactly the same. And that's what makes any firm or any business great is the diversity of the people. So when, a firm looks at their people and enables their people to be themselves and supports them in doing, maybe somebody enjoys running 5Ks or just running in general. And, maybe this person, wants to form a team, and maybe there's a charitable organization that's connected to the team. If maybe the firm promotes that race on social media, or then that employee feels supported and enabled, they're going to then shout that out to the moon, to the mountaintops, and everyone's going to hear that. So I think just inherently supporting the people of the organization, whether it's big or small, like again, social media is a very powerful tool. So even just a LinkedIn post, tagging the organization, tagging the person, and, putting it out there, that goes such a long way because it shows support and it shows that, again, the company cares about that individual, and it's very easy to do. It's a small action.
And the profession as a whole is facing challenges around recruitment and retention in particular. What I think you're saying is that personal branding or investing more time in this area is something that can help firms retain talent.
Absolutely. 'Cause personal brand, in my opinion, is directly connected to culture. It's firm culture is, if you go onto glassdoor.com, you just read some of the comments. Culture, culture, culture. It's literally repeated gazillions of times about, what's it like to work at this company? What's it like to work, not even just with accounting firms, just companies in general. So if you're linking your, personal brand, and if you're developing a personal brand and the company is supporting you in your efforts, I mean, it's a win-win for both.
So how do people get started in this area? What would you recommend as being a way from somebody who's maybe not thinking about this much right now, to thinking about how to apply some of these principles themselves, or to think about it more across their firm?
So, I mean, I would encourage everyone to, first off, from a firm perspective, from a global, leadership perspective, take a class on personal branding. And it's more of a marketing, personal development, professional development class type of deal. But at the end of the day, your personal brand is fueled by your passion. So encourage your employees to look inside, look within, and follow their passions. And, I always like to say, if there's a will, there's a way, and you can oftentimes link your passion to your day job if you want to. You don't have to, but I mean, why wouldn't you? If you're, we work a ton, so why wouldn't we want to incorporate that into our daily routine that happens to include work? But, link it to the community, link it to, different groups that you might be a part of, link it to, for me, I'm very fitness oriented. So, being active is important. So I link it to the gym. I bring that within my organization. I bring it within the accounting profession. You got to get a little creative, but, as accountants, we are inherently creative because we think outside the box all the time. And I would just say to, firm leaders specifically, encourage your staff, encourage your people to find what they're passionate about and then build on that.
So this, there's a lot of people think about personal branding, or at early stages might be thinking we're talking here about a lot about like just LinkedIn posts or things like that. Is it just LinkedIn posts, or what is it that's a broader perspective here, Nicole?
It's funny because I feel like LinkedIn has evolved over the last few years. Specifically now, I see aspiring accounting students in college on LinkedIn. 5 years ago, I never saw college students on LinkedIn. So that's a great thing, especially for the pipeline problem. It's, these younger future accountants, they're hungry. So LinkedIn is a great tool. Social media in general is a great tool, but it's also you have to be careful with social media because it's kind of like, Instagram versus reality. People are only showing you what they want you to see, which is great because being intentional is very important when you talk about a personal brand. You want to live your brand. You don't want to be fake or manufactured because people are going to see right through that. But at the end of the day, leveraging social media, whether it be Twitter or X or whatever it's called, Instagram, I can't keep up with the names, Instagram, and yes, even LinkedIn. I would say not so much for Facebook because to me that's more of a personal thing, whereas you want to keep it separate. But social media is a great and powerful tool. Just kind of got to be really intentional with how you use it.
And I think a lot of people will be thinking about, how do I get started if I'm not doing that already? LinkedIn, I completely agree with your comments there around that integrity, or something that really is something that you're passionate about, because as soon as you can tie in that passion or that enthusiasm to a context that you're sharing and you're talking more openly, people can see that for a mile off. They can see a post that is really based on integrity and something that you believe in versus something that is not there. And I think it's a massively underutilized resource. I looked recently at some of the influencer lists here in the US accounting space, and some of these people have hundreds of thousands of followers, and they're not posting on LinkedIn.
Right. Yeah.
And they're not and when they do post it, it doesn't add value to the conversation. So, is this an area that firms could, if they're looking at it, they are going to feel, where do I get started? Does it need a lot of thought to get started, or can they start quite small and start iterating from there?
I mean, the beauty of it is it's very easy to do, but I would say it's quality over quantity also. Some people just post to post, and there's not much really value added in those posts, so people aren't necessarily going to then pay attention to those posts because they're like, oh, they're just posting again, there's really nothing here, I'll just keep on scrolling. But if you're more intentional about what you post, the quality over the quantity, more people are going to pay attention to those posts. So I know there's a whole big data kind of, algorithm thing that people talk about. I don't know anything about that, but I do know there is some method to the madness with the algorithms, but I would definitely say quality over quantity for sure. And again, it goes back to just, being intentional and posting what you want, look into your voice. Like, what do you want people to see? What do you want people to hear? What is your message? And just always make sure that there is some sort of a method to the madness when you are posting or when you're sharing a photo. I find that adding media to posts makes it more kind of real. People like to, they pay more attention. Oh, a picture, and they're more likely to stop and look at it rather than just, hey, here are some words. Tagging organizations, tagging people, because then you're pulling other people into the post. That also kind of gets a bigger audience involved and also attracts more people because, again, to that algorithm madness, I know that has something to do with it too, from what I've been told. And I've seen it in the numbers too, because the numbers don't lie.
I would share from my personal experience, some of the things that you said there really do stand out. So using graphics, using pictures, particularly pictures of yourself in a more personal setting, etc., that really helps. Another thing you've got to bear in mind is that people are often scrolling through, doom scrolling as people will often call this. So one thing you've got to be very careful of is what is going to grab their attention. And so that first sentence, often called a hook, that can be really important in terms of whether somebody's going to click and read the rest of your post or not. So that can make or you could have a great post, but really a really weak opening line. People won't read that.
They're just going to keep going. It won't matter.
Exactly. But one thing I would say as well is that you've talked there about being intentional. I would say you also need to be willing to fail, in the sense of when you get started, do not expect, your post to be going viral and people to be adopting. And you've got to commit to this for a period of time, because you're not going to see the results from day one, maybe not even week one, maybe not even month one. But if you can commit to something that is based on your intentional plan, I think I've heard you talk as well about really focusing on, why are you doing what you're doing? Who is it you're trying to communicate that message to? And
your audience.
And what is it? Those are some of the things that I think people, they aren't complicated concepts, but people need to come into this eyes wide open if they want to get started.
So I say common sense isn't common. And this is certainly one of those things I feel like it's common sense, but it's like you don't really think about it too much. And I want to go back to what you said about failing. As much as we hate failing, it is so important to fail, because we do the most growing when we fail. We might, fall off that horse and it's going to stink for a little bit. But when we get back on, we attack it with a little bit of a different of a perspective, and maybe we fail again. Okay, well, we try again, and we grow during that whole experience. It's essentially a journey at the end of the day. It's not just like, all right, I'm doing this and it's done. It's a journey, and failing is inevitable. It's going to happen, but it's going to make you stronger at the end of the day.
We've touched on some of the, I think you call it the 10 tips or the 10 areas that you would recommend people focus on. We've teased out a couple here already in this conversation, but are there any that really for you are really important things that you recommend to people or share with people that we haven't touched on already?
I would say be relatable. Somebody out there is going to be able to relate to you. If you're not living your brand, if it's manufactured, people are going to figure that out. So be authentic. Make sure, it's relatable. Make sure you have something to say and tell a story, because again, what's the purpose behind what do you want to say? And why do you want to say it? Why is it important to you? If it's important to you, it's important. And if you feel that it's important, people are inevitably going to listen to you. It's just a matter of, executing and getting your voice to be heard and those different avenues. So, personal branding, it's like I said, common sense isn't necessarily common sometimes. And for this, most people already have a personal brand. They just don't realize they have it until they kind of stop, take a step backwards and look inside. And, again, it goes back to passion. And, if you're passionate about something, then that's your starting point right there. So it's kind of, I hate to say that simple, because it's really not simple, but it starts very simple, very basic.
And I think it can feel, certainly as an accountant myself, branding and marketing and all those, there are areas that I've certainly had to invest more time over the years to really get to understand better and to work out what works, what doesn't work, etc. But this area feels like one where taking a step back and planning and being, who is it I'm speaking to? What do I want to talk about? Where do I want to talk about these things? All of that feels like something that can be built into more of a framework or more something that is a plan.
Yes.
Rather than just simply going out and posting a bunch of stuff and seeing like from trial and error what's going to work, because you're going to need that level of consistency for people to constantly see, oh, you talk about this and you're an expert in this area, you're passionate about this. So having that plan rather than, yes, there's a time and a place for experimentation, but actually really narrowing that in so as you can focus on, well, these are the things I want to talk about. Let's experiment, whether I'm writing a blog post or I'm doing a short piece or I'm maybe creating a graphic or something like that. That feels to me the way people could approach it.
Yeah, especially as accountants, like we're very structured in nature. So the who, what, why, where, how, whole, that is literally what I teach about. And I also like to incorporate SMART goals and stakeholder mapping, because you're gonna have an audience, but within that audience, there's going to be different types of people. Are they even interested in what you have to say? Maybe there's a high level of interest, maybe there's a low level of interest. Are they, influenced by, do they have influence over what message you're trying to deliver? If they're highly influential and they're highly interested, you want to really pay attention to those audience members. If they're not really influenced and they're not really, interested, you still want to keep them in the know, but maybe, just not as frequently. So it's funny when you stakeholder mapping is very important, but it's funny when you kind of plot it down and you write it down and kind of go through the process of, who is your target audience, what is it that you basically want to do and how do you want to deliver it? How do you want to execute? It becomes very accountant-like, as I like to call it, because again, we are structured in nature and we do like kind of, that A, B, C, D mentality. And again, if you fail to plan, you fail. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I always get it backwards, but that's the right way.
You got there eventually, didn't you?
Eventually I got there.
And so bringing this all together, so really great, interesting topics we've talked about here. For somebody just getting started, we may have already touched on it, but what would you recommend as the 1, 2, 3 steps they should take first? If we want to boil this down into a process that somebody could follow, what would you recommend as to first do this, then take it from there?
So I would say first, write down a couple of words, values, characteristics that you feel define you. And then go and ask a friend a couple of words, characteristics that they feel define you. And look to see if they align. Because oftentimes our, perception of ourselves isn't necessarily how others see us. So you want to get that kind of at least meeting in the middle. First things first, because sometimes, and I can guarantee you every time, what you feel or think about yourself, other people are going to think and feel differently. So there's going to be a mismatch. So if you can kind of bridge that gap and find the alignment there, that's kind of step one. Step two, look inward, I would say, and what's your passion? What drives you? What motivates you? What makes you energized? Is it charitable work? Is it teaching? Is it the list goes on, painting, running, photography, writing, whatever it is that energizes you. Figure out what your passion truly is. And then start to execute a plan, an organized plan. Don't just go out guns blazing, because then you're definitely going to fail. But have some sort of a plan of, execution. What are you going to do? And make sure you incorporate those SMART goals into your plan so that you can at least measure and benchmark your progress. Because if you don't have a time-sensitive goal or a quantifiable, measurable goal, how can you measure the progress that you make? There's no benchmark. So I always like to incorporate goals or SMART goals, just because then you can kind of check it off along the way and feel at least, I'm going in the right direction or I'm accomplishing what I originally set out to do. And it'll just be natural, because theoretically, if you're living your brand, you're not going to change what you're doing. You're just going to be a little bit more intentional with how you're putting it out there for others to see.
And with goals, I would definitely recommend in this particular area, focus on things that you can control, like activity and like your commitments to writing on I'm going to post once a week. Don't overestimate what you're capable of, because you'll drop off, but focus on that rather than focusing on how many likes you're going to get or how many views or things like that.
Yes.
Because those aren't the things that are important in the early stages. It's around like committing to this particular area and being intentional, being consistent, etc. I definitely recommend that. And what about leaders who are trying to promote their teams to be invested more in this area of personal branding? Are the steps going to look the same, or how would a leader go about trying to implement personal branding more pervasively across their accounting firm or organization?
I would say it absolutely starts at the top, because the toe at the top sets the bar, and then it eventually kind of trickles down. So if leadership is, doing what they want their staff and their people to ultimately do, it's not as big of a jump for their people to then do this whole personal branding thing. And if your leaders are, passionate about something and the firm is supporting it, and then the people are going to slowly follow behind, I mean, it starts at the top. So, maybe, partner in charge is passionate about, like I used the example running earlier. We're just going to keep on that because it's an easy one. And, they form a firm company team for 5K, and they raise money for a charity. And, whoever's on that team, clearly they're also probably passionate about running as well. So maybe then they're going to go and coordinate a team a couple months from now, or whenever the time frame is. But getting people involved and showing and supporting those passions, it's inherently going to then trickle down.
Really appreciate your time. The insights you shared, I'm sure, are going to be really valuable for lots of people.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for that, Nicole.
Much appreciated. Thank you.